War often forces ordinary people to use extraordinary creativity. During the Second World War, soldiers and resistance fighters weren't always equipped with the latest weapons or endless supplies. Many times, survival depended on ingenuity, turning everyday items into lethal tools of defense or offense. These weren't just desperate measures. They were practical, field-tested improvisations that gave soldiers a fighting chance when the odds were stacked against them. Today, we'll explore 9 unusual weapon hacks that emerged from the trenches, the forests, and even occupied towns. Some of them reveal the darker side of wartime necessity, but all of them highlight the raw innovation that came when people had no choice but to fight with whatever they had at hand. Soldiers turned bottles into instant firebombs. One of the most widely known improvised weapons of the war was the Molotov cocktail. A simple glass bottle filled with gasoline or kerosene, often mixed with oil to make it cling to surfaces, became a devastating anti-tank or anti-personnel weapon. Resistance fighters in occupied Europe and Soviet soldiers on the Eastern Front relied on this crude yet effective hack. A rag stuffed into the neck served as a fuse. Once lit and hurled, the bottle shattered, spreading flames across targets. The simplicity meant anyone with access to fuel and bottles could make one. In modern terms, this shows how everyday containers and fuels can serve as force multipliers in survival situations, though the ethical and legal use of such tactics remains bound to wartime extremes. Helmets were repurposed as both shields and traps. A soldier's steel helmet was more than head protection. In many accounts, helmets became improvised weapons themselves. When filled with sand or rocks, they could be swung as a blunt force tool in close combat. Some soldiers also used helmets as decoys, placing them on sticks above trenches to draw enemy fire and reveal sniper positions. Others went further, rigging helmets as noise traps with stones inside so they would rattle if disturbed by enemy scouts at night. The lesson here is adaptability. Even an object designed for one purpose can be leveraged for multiple defensive or offensive uses when resources are limited. Entrenching tools doubled as deadly melee weapons. The humble entrenching tool, a foldable shovel every soldier carried, became a common hand-to-hand combat weapon. Its sharpened edge could cut, while the flat of the blade could crush. Accounts from both German and Soviet soldiers describe modifying the edges of shovels to act like axes, giving them more lethality in close-quarters fighting. Some even practiced drills specifically for shovel combat. In today's preparedness world, this shows why multi-purpose tools matter. What serves as a digger for shelter can also serve as a weapon in emergencies. Radios and batteries were adapted into field explosives. Electronics of the era may seem primitive compared to today's standards, but, resourceful soldiers knew how to turn them into improvised devices. Resistance groups sometimes converted radios, batteries, and wiring into makeshift detonators. By rigging a charge to a simple electrical spark, they could trigger explosives remotely or on delay. German troops discovered that partisans in occupied countries would strip household devices for copper wire and components to fuel sabotage operations. The broader takeaway here is that knowledge of basic circuitry can turn even mundane supplies into powerful tools, an insight that shaped modern guerrilla warfare for decades after. Socks and stones created improvised slings. In moments of desperation, soldiers and partisans went back to ancient technology. A weighted sock, often with stones or even spare metal parts inside, could be swung as a flail or thrown as a sling. British commandos recorded field instances of captured or unequipped fighters using these crude but effective weapons. At close range, a stone-filled sock could break bones or incapacitate an enemy guard silently. This hack highlights a universal survival truth. Sometimes the simplest, oldest tools are the most reliable, especially when manufactured weapons aren't available. Bicycle parts became traps and weapons. In occupied Europe, bicycles were everywhere, and their parts often found new life on the battlefield. Chains were repurposed as garrotes or weighted whips. Spokes, once sharpened, became stabbing implements or triggers for booby traps. Resistance fighters often laid caltrops made from twisted bicycle metal to puncture vehicle tires or slow enemy patrols. The ingenuity here wasn't just about fighting, it was about buying time, creating diversions, and using mobility aids against a stronger enemy force. For survivalists today, this demonstrates how even the most ordinary transport devices can provide hidden defensive tools. Cans and nails, were transformed into improvised grenades. When proper fragmentation grenades ran short, soldiers sometimes built their own from ration tins, nails, and a bit of black powder or explosives. By filling a tin can with shrapnel and sealing it with an improvised fuse, they created devastating close-range weapons. Guerrilla fighters across Asia used similar tactics against Japanese forces. These devices were honestly quite crude and dangerous even to the user, but they served a vital role in resistance warfare. It was a hack born of desperation, but it really underscores how even the simplest containers, when combined with explosive knowledge, can tip the balance in small-scale conflicts. Knives were, hidden in everyday household items. Disguised weapons became especially common among resistance fighters. Razor blades tucked inside combs, knives concealed in walking sticks, and even kitchen utensils ground down to stabbing points became part of daily survival, you see. Soldiers behind enemy lines often relied on these modifications to pass unnoticed while still retaining a fighting chance if captured. The creativity here, honestly, speaks to the survivalist mindset of blending in, where weapons weren't meant to intimidate but to remain invisible until absolutely needed. The practical modern lesson is subtlety. Sometimes, concealment offers more power than open display. Lastly, soldiers often turned their own clothing into weapons. Heavy boots fitted with hobnails could be used to stomp with lethal force. Belts with metal buckles became makeshift flails, while straps doubled as garrotes in desperate encounters. Reports from prisoner of war escapes detail how belts and straps often provided both utility and defense. This hack reveals the value of thinking about ordinary apparel as more than just passive protection. What seems like a simple fastening device could, in dire moments, be used for survival. These 9 unusual weapon hacks from World War II remind us that ingenuity under pressure can make the difference between survival and defeat. While today's world is far removed from the desperation of wartime Europe or Asia, the underlying principle remains the same. Resourcefulness is the ultimate weapon. Soldiers and civilians alike understood that everything around them, whether a shovel, a bottle or a bicycle, could be reimagined into something far more powerful. For history buffs and survival enthusiasts, these stories offer more than curiosity. They serve as timeless lessons in adaptability, creativity, and the ability to act decisively with limited resources. If you found this deep dive into wartime improvisation valuable, remember to subscribe to In the Beginning for more insights into forgotten history and survival wisdom. Share this with others who appreciate learning how the past can teach resilience for the future, and keep exploring the resourcefulness that shaped some of the most difficult years in modern history.